When I first came out, in very short order, first kinky and then poly and then bi, all within a matter of some months. Shortly after my sister had come out as gay, incidentally, she was very grateful to me for taking the heat off of her.
But wait, there's more.
But we had a terrible fight early on, and I think we both kind of got it that was not a fight that could happen twice and still have us loving each other. So for a long time, we just didn't talk about it. And we had reached a balance. It wasn't a comfortable balance, but it was acceptable. And then he had my sister and me up for, I think it was his 70th birthday, so about a decade ago. And I could see it in his eyes that night. And what I saw in his eyes was, these might not be the daughters I would have chosen, but they're the only ones I'm going to get. And he has been to hear me do readings about outrageous fisting scenes, and sat there in the audience looking relatively okay with it.
So you came out as polyfisterous.
I came out as polyfisterous, yes.
Did you have a comment on that?
No. Nothing to say.
So the very first time I really experienced this, I was very close with a super religious, conservative, judgmental kind of person that was just closed-minded in so many ways. And then I stopped being that guy. And the reason I stopped being that guy was directly related to my fantasies. I realized that my own fantasies, my own ideal life that I wanted to live out was against my own beliefs. The life that I wanted, I was judging. It was a weird cognitive dissonance. And I just had to accept that, man, I've been wrong. I have been wrong about so many people. I've been wrong about myself. It's part of that transformation that I mentioned earlier in 2007. It was like, fuck all that, man. I've been wrong. And I'm in a constant place of that because as someone who wanted to be a priest, I'm used to being up here giving a sermon. I'm just preaching out of different books now, including some of the ones that are over on that table. And so I struggle with my own sense of, I know what's right, and I'm going to tell everybody what's right. Wait a minute, there's other rights in the world. There's other people that are right. There's other styles. And I'm constantly apologizing for the fact that no matter how many people I have on this stage, I can't possibly represent all the views that fall under consensual non-monogamy. It's just not possible. But I try, and that's why I like to keep a diverse panel. And there will be different opinions at the next one, I assure you. What it took for me to be ready to learn was to hate myself. I had to hate who I was. I had to go, fuck this guy. This guy is an awful person that I don't want to be anymore. And so to expect any of us to have the power to go, you need to hate what you've been and be more like me, that's really difficult. And it's asking a lot of people. And we need to accept people to a certain extent where they currently are on this and just be that little bit of baby step of like, well, have you thought about this? Well, think about it.
You know, somebody asked about, like, have you seen somebody change, go from, like, hating it to being okay with it? So I personally have never seen somebody change. I'm thinking of Polly here. But I did see people who were scared of loving me and then got unscared once they got over, like, the realization that people are just human and they can just get over it. But they were at the scared point. I've never seen anybody come from hate to love. I've seen people go from scared.
Well, you've met one.
Yeah. I read a fascinating article a year or two back about a guy who was a fundamentalist priest somewhere in the southern Midwest. And he did something that is truly noteworthy and radical for a fundamentalist priest. He went and took a human sexuality class at his local community college. And he found out about intersex. And all of a sudden, binary gender fell apart. And so he couldn't hate gays anymore because gender was no longer binary. And last I heard about him, he's teaching sexuality classes for married people through that's his mission. So that what I did, finding out that you're wrong and taking steps to make up for your wrongness, it's a tremendous act of courage. It truly is. I have huge respect for people who can do that.
Along those lines, there was a priest at the university church at USC campus that I used to go to, a Catholic church, and he taught the whole congregation, not just me, the idea of universal salvation. He really believed that hell was nonsense, that it didn't exist, that it was invented to sell and buy a way out of hell. You've got to go to purgatory and all that. And so he was actually referencing back to the early church with Origen, where that was around 150 AD, something like that. That's what they actually taught. Everybody goes to heaven eventually. That's what they taught. And that just blew my mind. You mean all those gay and queer and weird people are not going to hell because there is no hell? That really blew my mind. That was actually step one in the process. It was bold and brave of him to say that stuff in church. The way I do it is constantly. I'm constantly having to relearn and figure things out all over again, especially since I'm putting myself in an undeserved position of authority. None of us are really the authority in any of these things because we're having to reinvent the wheel. And I'm constantly having to re-examine my thoughts on all of this stuff. It never stops.
There's a good authority you can look to for some advice here, and that would be a therapist or spiritual counselor or whatever it is. Like, seriously though, so you find somebody to like walk you through this. This is a huge undertaking if you're like going all the way from one end of the spectrum and changing a belief to the other. Like, if you're really trying to make a huge change, get some help, find somebody to go on a journey with you.
I agree and I disagree with that. That's the beauty of all this. And in the sense that a singular mentor can lead you astray in a direction that's not really compatible with who you should be and who you really are. I believe that community is the ultimate shortcut. And man, as it gets screwed up when community is wrong, because sometimes they are. Sometimes you're in a community that has a singular opinion about something that you don't agree with, and so you end up crossing into multiple communities in ways that are incompatible, and you find yourself more alone than ever. But the way to save yourself from that is to go, personally, each of us is a God. Each of us is the authority on ourselves.
I got asked after I was actually on Cunning Minx's Polyamory Weekly podcast, and we had it in Eugene. And afterwards, a young woman came up and wanted to ask me something about DS. She said, "Is it okay for a submissive to have two dominants?" And I started off explaining, that they've got to be in sync with each other. You can't do this if you don't have some. And she said, "No, but everybody where I live," which was Medford, tells me that it's not okay for a submissive to have two dominants. And I said, "Well, you go back and you tell them you met Janet Hardy, and Janet Hardy says, 'Fuck that.'" So I'm perfectly willing to put myself up there as a fuck that authority. Anytime one of you is getting advice from your community or whoever that you don't like, I'm happy to be the fuck that person, because I've got my name on a book, so I must know what I'm doing, right?
Believe me, I'm working on one. Along those lines, I believe all my partners have other dominants in their lives to various degrees. And not everyone agrees with that policy, and how could I allow that, and how could I be cool with that? And what it comes down to is that the dominants actually have to consent to each other's existence on some level. They could always exit. "Oh, you've got a new dominant? I'm out." That's the ultimate, it's not that you can't, it's that I can't, and I'm out. And that's fine, I think that's a valid way to do it, but that's often not talked about, is that the dominants have to consent to each other's existence.
That was what I was trying to tell her, yeah. There has to be some collaboration, but there's no rule against it at all.
And on that note, we really must wrap up, and I want to hear a big round of applause for both Morgan and Janet.